there is this ongoing crossfire between the Modi government and Twitter that's been raging for the last many weeks over a separate issue. What do you think happened?
A direct action of any kind of suspension or anything else, it makes the platform look like they're taking a final judgment call on behalf of everybody else. Right? There are enough authorities in the country to be able to take a final call on whether any such thing has happened. And any user on the platform should be able to contest it.
Ravi Shankar Prasad happens to be the Minister of IT for India, is not the reason why we should be discussing this. We should be discussing this because several users in India have to endure this.
Yeah.
And there is no audience that they have to seek redressal, which is exactly what the intermediary rules have been asking for. Appointing a grievance redressal officer, somebody who can look at compliance, and a nodal officer of sorts, which Twitter hasn't complied with.
All laws are municipally bound to the territories to which they apply. So Indian laws apply to India. So effectively what Twitter has done is this. By applying DMCA, what they are trying to claim is DMCA may have extraterritorial jurisdiction, but that extraterritorial jurisdiction has to be applied qua victims who are within US.
Right.
Irrespective of where the act of violation may have happened. It cannot apply to alleged violations with respect to Indian content.
Yes.
Copyright is treated very differently. Now, even under Indian law, as far as copyright takedowns are concerned, they aren't governed by the intermediary guidelines. They are governed by the copyright rules. In fact, Section 81 or something of the IT Act says that Copyright Act overrides the IT Act. Basically, the way it works, for example, is supposing a new movie is being released tomorrow or day after, and somebody puts a link on it on its Twitter or something like that. So you immediately write to Twitter and ask them immediately to block this. And after that, they are supposed to get an order to support that within the next 21 days. So the blocking is immediate. That's the nature of copyright violation.
So if you look back at the laws, there are parts of the law which don't allow Twitter to make public the reasons for takedowns, right? Especially when it's a government takedown. Twitter can't disclose it to me. So if you want disclosure, I mean, I would say that in the larger context, there are failures of transparency and accountability both by the government as well as by big tech platforms.
Subcommittee report of the Supreme Court is very clear. It says that Delhi raised excess oxygen demand. Delhi had a maximum need of 500 MT per day, demanded 700.
There is no such report which exists. We have spoken to some of the subcommittee members and they have said that there is no such report and there is nobody who has claimed that he has signed that report. There are no
It's an interim report. Saurabh Bhardwaj, our reporters are saying it's an interim report, it's not a final report.
It can be any report, Rajdeep, but every report has to have a credibility which is basically borrowed to a report by signing it. The authors of the report sign it. None of the authors have signed that report, so that is basically a report which is a figment of imagination and basically manufacturing by BJP in their headquarters. Second thing, Rajdeep, all the reporters who are based in Delhi, all the journalists, all the television channels have run stories live from the private hospitals of Delhi, from the government hospitals of Delhi. People were dying because of oxygen. I think Arvind Kejriwal is not such a big political entity that he can manufacture a fake demand of oxygen.
It is an interim report and it is out in the public domain. And it says, please read it. It says even if there was an exaggerated demand, nobody denies that there was oxygen shortage. It was the worst time we've seen. All of us have seen. But it was a national emergency.
Right.
Because of this exaggeration, because of the histrionics, because of covering up for not even making one oxygen plant when they were paid for 8. As Hemanta Biswa Sarma said before the crisis, to cover up all of that, there were not even oxygen tanks unloaded to ensure the supply of oxygen. Yet the demand was exaggerated 4 times. With little respect to the fact there are other states and people are dying everywhere. And that in a crisis like this, oxygen has to be rationed.
The calculation by WHO that a patient who is in ICU, he needs about 25 liters of oxygen gas in a minute. And the patients who are outside of the ICU, they need about 15 liters of oxygen. per minute. And if you calculate the whole day, a hospital which is 500 bedded hospital, and from the Delhi government side, the hospital has been made a 400 bedded COVID hospital, keeping in the mind, we need about 7,000 to 8,000 liters of liquid medical oxygen per day. So one side, the government was keep on opening the makeshift hospitals.
So you're saying...
On the other side, there was no oxygen available to the established hospital where you can really manage the patient in a beautiful way.
Is there merit in the Law and IT Minister saying Twitter is warning the people in India, if you don't follow Twitter's line, if you don't toe Twitter's line, they will remove you from the platform?
Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad was informed that his account will be logged, and Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad can actually file a complaint and saying that his account should not be logged, and he was informed about it. The same case happened with Mr. Shashi Tharoor erstwhile as well, and Mr. Shashi Tharoor has also tweeted about this. The same case has happened. So the account was logged, and Twitter did their investigation, and then they found that the Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad account should not be withheld. They released the account, but they withheld that particular tweet.
Twitter certainly seems to be happy to give up its status as an intermediary, which makes it very apparent that Twitter is happy to be liable for court cases for all the content published on it. So Twitter needs to figure out, is this the way it wants to operate in the country?
The law says that for any third-party content, if you want to remove of any user, or you want to restrict the content, or you want to block or restrict his account, you have to give him an advance notice. In this case, Mr. Prasad, who technically is a private affected party, was not given any notice, not for this time, not for any previous violation. A East India company which is continuously flouting and brazenly defying legal orders given by the government, authorities in riot situations, on an event where people are calling for genocide.
Yes.
A company which is continuously refusing to comply with Indian law passed by the Parliament of India, thinking of itself as some sovereign entity sitting on some island where no law applies on them, today is attempting to apply a DMCA act, which is a US law, in Indian territory.